We're now going to discuss the cognitive development of children. And let's first define the word cognition. And cognition refers to all mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. Somewhere in your life, you became conscious. When was it and how did it unfold? Um, this became a huge discussion and a project and then a lifelong journey for a developmental psychologist named Jean Piaget. It began in 1920 when he was in Paris developing questions for a children's IQ test. And what Piaget became intrigued by was not the right questions that children got correct, but the ones that they got wrong. And what he discovered was that a child who was 8 years old would be able to answer a question that a child who was 6 years old would not be able to answer. And so, because of that, he was thinking that children actually must develop thinking. And up to this point, uh, children were thought of as miniature adults. There was no differentiation of the way that they thought in the population's belief. They thought children were just miniature adults, and children and adults thought the same way. But Piaget came to the conclusion that no, children actually develop a way of thinking through uh, just developmental stages and experience. So he thought now that children must develop and their mind must work in stages. So what he thought was that the maturing brain, a child's brain, builds schemas. And this is an important word for you to remember, schemas, which are concepts or mental molds into which we pour our experiences. Concepts or mental molds into which we pour our experiences. So, here's Piaget's concepts to explain schemas. What we do is we assimilate a new experience. All right, so let's just pretend that we're a child has one of those little board books, and the parent is reading the book to the child and pointing out the pictures of animals. And so they're going to assimilate this new experience and say, the parent says, the cow has 4 legs. The cow has 4 legs. This is the new experience of the child. This is what they're going to interpret in the terms of their current understanding, which is their schema. Cows have 4 legs. So for a child, they would now think that all 4-legged creatures must be cows. Okay? All right? That makes sense. And as they interact with the world and have more experiences and are given more information, they're going to take the new information and it accommodate that schema to incorporate new information. And as they're going along, and the parent's showing them that no, dogs have 4 legs, cats have 4 legs, lambs have 4 legs. So they now understand that many animals actually have 4 legs. So Piaget decides children are learning through schemas and in which they're assimilating and accommodating information. And so they're going through this process. And what he decided to do was come up with a theory, a developmental theory that we use to this day as to how this learning, this cognition, this development occurs. And so we're going to go through some of these stages of Piaget's. And of course, if you keep continuing on in psychology or childhood development, you'll go in depth into this. So this is just kind of a cursory overview. But let's start off with the sensory motor stage. This is Piaget's theory, and it's the stage sensory motor. And this is birth to 2 years. And what this stage does is the children, they take in the world by senses and actions. They're looking, they're touching, they're seeing, they're hearing. But what they have during this time, we're going to just break down into a few categories within each stage, okay? And within this sensory motor, we're going to talk about something called object permanence. And you'll be reading about it in your book, and we'll watch a video on it. And what this means is before 6 months, infants actually lack, and it's important for you to understand the word lack. They lack object permanence. And if you just take the word object permanence, you would say, well, permanent object, something that's there, something that's you can hold, you can see, it's going to stay there. But if you lack object permanence, what it means is for infants, if they don't see it anymore, it didn't exist. In other words, out of sight, out of mind. So you can have something in front of a child, be 6 months and earlier, approximately, and you can take it away from them and they're not going to miss it. They're not going to look for it. They lack that ability to have object permanence. And so they just, they just go on their merry way and look at you. It means nothing to them. So by 8 months, they will look for an object if they don't see it. So it could be the mother. The mother's there, then she goes out of the room and they start crying. They look for her. Peekaboo is a very big, if you cover your face, well, they're going to look for, they're like, where did you go? Where did you go? So it becomes a very fun game because all of a sudden you realize that, oh, you're still here. So if you covered up a toy on a table, the child would take the blanket or whatever and find the toy underneath it. So that is really important. So it just doesn't happen. Today, they're kind of questioning that 8 months is, well, is this really this time period or does it just happen gradually? But as we said in previous lectures, children do things on their own time frame. So that sensory motor period, birth to 2 years, I want you to remember that. And I want you to remember object permanence because that's a key thing within there. There are many other important aspects of the sensory motor stage, but for intro, this is the one we're going to focus on, okay? So now, the next stage of Piaget's is the pre-operational stage. This is 2 up to, say, 6 or 7. And so this is a fascinating stage, the pre-operational, because during this stage, children are too young to perform mental operations. And think about mental operations as being math. So they can use language. They have, that ability, but they do not have the ability to understand conservation, and think of that as size, volume. So this is what the principle for conservation is. The principle is that quantity remains the same despite changes in shape. And what do I mean by this? I mean that a child would look at a glass of milk. It's in, say, an 8-ounce glass, all right? And if you poured that 8-ounce glass of milk into a very tall, thin glass, and of course the volume would rise much higher than in the 8-ounce glass, that child would say, because they can't perform mental operations and they don't understand conservation, okay, mass, volume, numbers, they remain the same in their mind, all right, despite changes in form and size. So for them, they would say it's not the same amount of milk, even though it's in a, we saw them pour the milk into the tall glass. To a child, they would say that the tall, skinny glass actually has more milk. Even though they saw it, they don't have the ability to understand that change, it's the same amount of milk. So that is a very interesting concept that they're unable to grasp. And we will watch a video after this of children performing conservation, this pre-operational stage. The next within this same stage, pre-operational, is egocentrism. Egocentrism is about preschool children, approximately 2 to 4 years old. They're egocentric. Think about the word ego, self, centric, centered. They're centered on their self. And what they have is difficulty perceiving things from another's point of view. So, I always use this example, and I'm going to once again, and now it'll be in posterity because it'll be on this video, but my niece, when she was little and I took care of her, and we would call her mom during the day, she was at work, and say she had drawn a picture and I put it on the refrigerator, and she'd be talking to her mom, and she'd start talking about that picture on the refrigerator. Do you see my picture of the horsey? Because she believed that her mother, her view of the world was exactly the same as hers. So if she was seeing the picture of the horse on the refrigerator, then her mother, who was sitting in her office many miles away, must be able to see that picture too. All right? Have you ever had a young child and they stand in front of the television set watching Sesame Street or something, and you're behind them or other people are behind them? They don't understand. They're not being rude. They're not trying to be, difficult. They actually have no idea that no one else can see that television screen. They're standing in front of it and they believe that everyone else's view is the same as theirs. So when they're standing there and you think, oh, they're so rude, they're not. They're egocentric. They don't understand it. All right? Now, the next one is theory of mind. Now, preschoolers, okay, we just talked about them being egocentric, but at the same time, they have the ability to infer others' mental states when they begin forming relationships, a theory of mind. And so a child who seems so very egocentric, at the same time, if little Johnny's over in the corner crying at preschool, they will go up and they will pat Johnny on the arm and say, Johnny, why are you crying? Johnny? Or, the mother sits down in a chair and she seems sad. A child will come up and pat them and say, you okay, Mommy? They have a theory of mind. they can infer another person's mental state. And that's amazing because at the same time they're egocentric and think that the world they see is the world that you see. So those are our three important concepts within pre-operational. Okay, so we have the lack of mental operations conservation, egocentrism, and theory of mind. So the next one we're going to go to is concrete operational. And this is about 6 to 7 years old. They enter this stage, and the word concrete means solid, not moving, and that is where children are at this time. Everything is black and white, no gray. Uh, in this case, concrete, meaning involving actual experience. At this time, they can understand conservation. So if you poured that same milk into the tall glass, they would understand that it's the same amount of milk, it's just a different size glass. So they understand these math formations, but in very many ways, they are very uh, straight and concrete in their thinking. They don't like to deviate from anything. If they're in school and they're going down a line, the teacher says, everybody get in line. And if someone stepped out of the line, they would be very upset. Everything is black and white. You got to follow rules and obey. So in this point, they're trying to avoid punishment by doing what they are told. The last stage of Piaget's is the formal operation stage, and that is age 12 and on. And one of the most important aspects of this stage is now children, adolescents, have the ability to have abstract thinking, and that's the ability to think outside the box. They're no longer thinking in that concrete way. It's all or nothing. They now understand other people have different views. They try to take other people's perspective. They are able to think abstractly. All right, well, this is the end of this section, and next we are going to discuss adolescence. Fun times!